You're watching the Action Sports Jax 24/7 network. Now it's time for the Brent and Austen Show.
Hey, welcome into a Tuesday. We're live at Best Bet St. Augustine and, the city of Jacksonville. And getting ready for another hot day and getting ready for the Tampa Bay Bucks that come to town over the next couple of days, Wednesday and Thursday. That's the excitement. They're at Everbank Stadium for the next couple of days at Jags headquarters. And then, of course, a game on Saturday inside the bank, 7:30 kickoff this week against the Bucks, where we likely won't see the first teamers, but there's still a lot to keep an eye on. That'll be one of the topics today, actually. There were so many guys that shined, and we talked about Parker Washington and Mac Jones and other players, Tank Bigsby, that 2023 draft class. What about some others that you almost have to look up? Who are these guys? And, that's that time of year in training camp. One of the big stories around the NFL, by the way, is not a who are these guys instead of a welcome back. Both you and Hamby saw this. Martavis Bryant is getting back. You take 6 years away from the league and you come back in? I mean, who is this guy? Chad Ochocinco?
I mean, he might be. We'll see. I think it's harder enough to be away from the game for 1 year, let alone, your last game being in 2018 it was. So, yeah, I think that the deck is definitely stacked against Martavis Bryant, but just a guy who popped up today where it's like, oh, yeah, I remember him. Speedster, played at Pittsburgh a little bit, spent some time. Well, I think at the time would have been Oakland, but also maybe Las Vegas when they first moved there. Definitely a guy who you kind of forget about, and then he just pops up. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember him.
Did he wear number 18? In my mind, he wore number 18 at one point.
Let's look it up.
I don't even know why. I'm not like a fantasy football guy, but I feel like Martavis Bryant making plays, Pittsburgh 18 was the number that I remember.
10.
Dang.
At Pittsburgh. Missed it by that much.
Yeah, it wasn't that far off.
Yeah.
Usually those guys are in their 80s.
Yeah.
There's some wild storylines around the National Football League. One of the things we want to do today is kind of take a bigger picture look at the league because, I don't think there's been these crazy headlines. I don't know if it's just because Aaron Rodgers isn't talking as much on the Pat McAfee show or what.
Well, Aaron Rodgers does feel so bad about what happened with the whole COVID situation, though. He did say that.
Yeah, it's like a bio came out, right?
Yes.
And that is part of the story.
Yeah.
But what about the Hassan Reddick story? Mm-hmm. And what about the Matthew Judon story now out of New England? And we continue to monitor the Brandon Ayuk story. You could have three big-time players either somehow dramatic in their own rights in their own organizations or on the move still in the next few weeks. And I don't know, maybe we did have this last year and I just don't remember, but those are three big-time players. Is it going to get settled out, or is it going to be a stalemate, or is it going to be, hey, see you on the move, somebody else go, take a chance on one of these guys? And could Jacksonville be in the mix on any of them? They keep having this revolving door of pass rushers. If a pass rusher like that comes available, now the type of guy that they're trying to get in here, I don't know about Reddick, given his situation, that from the outside looking in, but a Judon would make some sense.
Judon would make some sense, but also I think you've seen some stuff to like from Gibson in the first preseason game. You've seen Abdullah now kind of, have his first sack and cement himself a little bit as a guy for depth. So I feel like the Jaguars will always be looking for, pass rush depth because you can never have too much of it, but it's got to come at the right price. And I get it. The salary cap is definitely non-existent. It's all facade as far as I'm concerned. But you have to ask yourself, if you bring in a guy like, if you bring a guy like Reddick, if you bring in a guy like Judon, how much is that going to cost you down the long run?
Yeah, the Reddick story is wild. First, let's go there.
Yeah.
This is a stalemate now. I mean, you have two people releasing. You have that side releasing, saying, hey, we want to trade. And then Joe Douglas comes out and the Jets are like, hey, we ain't trading you.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And apparently the story is, because you're getting the leaks from the reporters, which is coming from the agent, the story on the Reddick side of things was, listen, we told you part of the reason Philly moved us, we wanted a deal. And when they moved us, we wanted a deal. Like, you knew that coming in. Any team knew that. Yeah. And the Jets haven't been able to come to a deal. Now, Reddick didn't even show up. They couldn't find him, remember?
Yeah.
For a bit.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, this whole thing starts back when he was in Philly and he wanted out because he wanted a new contract. And Philly, in good light said, okay, we'll let you go and we'll let you pick where you want to go. You'll have command of what team you want to go to. The Jets become available. the dialogue, I believe, from what I've read, the research that I've done, said that eventually the Jets were going to pay Hassan Reddick. But the agreement, and this is just things that I've read. I'm not sure if it's true or not. But the agreement from Hassan Reddick was that he would come to all the off-season voluntary workouts, and then they would get a deal done after the season. Now, whether that message was passed on to Hassan Reddick, whether that message was passed on to his agent, and he didn't know, but when he found out that he couldn't get paid, before the season started, this is where it all kind of went to hell, if you will. And then there was reports saying how, he wants to be like, I think it's $40 million a year, which, sorry, man, not going to happen. And like the Jets really they brought a guy in. They had John Franklin Myers that they let go, essentially, who was a hell of a pass rusher in his own right, because they thought they were going to get Reddick for the entire season. So when we talk about that, you just got to remember, the Jets don't lose anything here if Reddick doesn't play. Because they gave up a conditional, I think they gave up a conditional third if he plays.
Right. Yeah.
If he doesn't play, what are they going to lose, a sixth? So the Jets kind of have all the power right now. From depth purposes, yeah, you want to get Reddick on the field because he's a great player and he can help your team win. But Reddick doesn't really have a lot of power right now because the Jets don't lose anything if he doesn't play.
Yeah, and by the way, they already have a very good defense. I mean, certainly would help to have them, but they have a very good one. They sent the Eagles a conditional 26th third-round pick, by the way. So It's not even like next year's third round pick. It's like way down the road third-round pick. And he has 50.5 sacks, and they let Bryce Huff go, too. They couldn't come to a deal with him, so that was kind of the replacement plan for to have Hassan Reddick. It's been a weird story ever since he got traded. I mean, I'm not sure he stepped foot in the building since he's been traded. I mean, maybe to sign, or at least to consummate the trade or whatever, or get a physical. I don't know, but it's like he hasn't even been a part of their team. It's pretty odd.
Correct.
He's a good player.
Yeah.
Very good player.
It's just, I don't know. I mean, obviously Reddick's to blame here a little bit, but I'm not sure if it's bad communication between agent and team, if it's bad communication between agent and player, but something got lost in translation, and there's obviously a giant disagreement now, and I really wonder, I mean, it's going to be a lot of fines coming Hassan Reddick's way, and I feel like the Jets are a team that aren't going to pull off that.
Do you think the Jags still need pass rush help?
I mean, I think you can always add pass rush help. Absolutely.
Well, because what's interesting to me is some of their moves that have been made, even some of their subtle moves in camp. The transaction wire is usually buzzing when you have 90 guys, so you really don't know what a lot of that means. We've talked about Tayshaun Gibson. What does a signing mean to the roster? That one's a little bit more easy to navigate, or at least have an idea of what it could mean. These other guys coming in, even Breland Speaks, right? The UFL player, a defensive player of the year. Okay, hey, let's see. Let's roll the dice, right? Let's get some competition. That's a back end, no doubt type of play. So those kind of moves don't necessarily say they're thirsting to find the fourth pass rusher. But I do think Deshaun Dixon is a guy that they were developing and bringing along and had been patient with. And then he tears his ACL last week in camp, so he's now out of the mix for that fourth pass rusher spot with a guy like Gibson. I've seen a guy like DJ Coleman play pretty well for the Jags. I mean, he's been all over the place on the practice field, and I thought he was all over the place the other night too. So he's an interesting guy in the mix here. So these are a lot of unknowns. So, yeah, I think at face value, could the Jags use more firepower, star power in their pass rush room? Sure. To me, Reddick isn't a play here. That's not why I bring it up. Judon's interesting because he wants a longer deal, a bigger deal, and he's on his final deal with the New England Patriots, who obviously are not in contention mode. Yeah. That was a great signing by the New England Patriots, and if I remember correctly, I thought the Jags might have been interested in Judon when he came out, or when Baltimore let him go. So when New England got him, I thought the Jags might have been in the mix. I don't know how heavy. I can't remember exactly how heavy they were, but that was a great signing by New England. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, but if you're going to pay Judon, then are you going to pay Trevon Walker then next year as well? Yeah. Because, I mean, you're going to have a lot of money then tied up with Josh Hines Allen, with, if you bring a guy like Judon, and then obviously Trevon Walker will probably get paid as well.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. Yeah. I don't know if of the two players out there and that one could move potentially, Judon would make more sense to me. And I think they're going to continue to kick tires on guys and hope for Gibson. And by the way, Gibson had a great series the other day too. And this is a guy that's done it before. I think we're probably sleeping on him a little bit too much. I think he's going to fill that role. If you're right, yesterday we were having this conversation, you get 30-plus sacks out of the trio of players.
Yeah.
Right, with Trayvon and Josh and Armstead.
Yeah.
I mean, Gibson only has to chip in like 4 sacks, and you could get a couple from an Abdullah, or you could get a couple more from even Devon Hamilton sneaks in a sack or 2, or Roy Robertson Harris has 3 or 4. I mean, now you're starting to compile. You're into the mid-40s in sacks, or up around 50.
And Brent, let's not make a mistake here. I mean, we have Travis Gibson being my super sleeper of the year. So I mean, I'm not sleeping on him by any means, dude. Like I think he's going to produce. I think he's going to be big in this Jaguars rotation.
Tank and Travis sitting on that couch for you.
Tank and Travis, man. You're going to need big years from you both of you. Yep, you're going to need big years from both of you. Yes.
And then the other one, from an NFL standpoint, now this is not really related to the Jags as much, but it's Brandon Ayuk. Mm-hmm. And Ayuk has really got some power in this of saying, hey, I don't want to go to New England. I don't want to go to Cleveland. I mean, there are deals on the table for this guy.
Yeah.
To go on. The Cleveland one was appetizing, I think, for San Francisco.
Did you see what they were offering him?
I think the Cleveland one ended up being Amari Cooper, a 2nd and a 5th, if I'm not mistaken.
What? So if you're Cleveland, do you make? I mean, so who wins that trade? Like if and once again, Ayuk said no, thank you. I'm going to stay in San Fran. That deal's not good enough for me. Obviously, if Ayuk goes to Cleveland, they would have gave him a new contract. Hindsight's 2020. We'll never know now. But who would win that deal? Would you say?
I actually think and I think I know where you're going here, because I believe we talked about it briefly. You like Amari Cooper. I like Amari Cooper. Mm-hmm. And I think the 2nd and 5th is a lot. And the other part of this is I'm still not sold that Ayuk is single-handedly by himself going to be a $30 million a year wide receiver. Yeah. I just don't know if he's that guy. And I think you can also say, hey, talent-wise, Devontae Adams can be that guy, but it hasn't worked out at all to be a $27 million receiver in Vegas. So I think it's very risky paying those receivers north of 25. I mean, Miami's got 2 of them, but there's not a lot of those guys around the league. And I don't think Ayuk is Justin Jefferson. I don't think Ayuk is Jamar Chase. I think he's not Tyreek Hill. I think there's a little bit of a next level in there. He's probably more $24 million guy rather than $30 million guy, in my opinion. So, yeah, I would say San Fran would get the better of the deal. They get a happy player in Amari Cooper, and they get a couple more picks to recoup and utilize and build draft capital for upcoming years.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so too. Absolutely.
So I don't know where he lands. So obviously this is a Pittsburgh-only thing. It's either he's going to play in San Francisco or he's going to Pittsburgh.
That's what it seems like. Yes.
So the latest one on Pittsburgh is San Francisco has inquired about Minkah Fitzpatrick. Mm-hmm. Are you that desperate for a receiver in Pittsburgh?
I mean, I think you're desperate for a receiver in Pittsburgh if you see their depth right now, but Minkah Fitzpatrick's a guy, when they brought in from would have been Miami, made a giant difference right away on their defense. Like he's the guy that can cause a turnover, that can give you big plays set aside from TJ Watt. It's pretty risky. I mean, I don't know if it'd be a straight-up trade Minkah for. I assume you probably have to throw another draft pick on there as well if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. But yeah, I mean, they are in desperate need, I think, of a wide receiver. So it does make some sense. Would I do it? Probably not, because I know what Minkah means to my defense, but it's intriguing.
I don't even know if we'll be able to hear Hamby or not, but let's try it. Hamby, do you think you would go bring in Minkah Fitzpatrick? Would you give up Minkah Fitzpatrick if you're Pittsburgh for the idea of getting your quarterback some help at the outside with Brandon Ayuk?
Absolutely, I would. Hopefully y'all guys can hear me. But
yep, we got you.
Yeah, I think Ayuk and paired with Pickens would be about, a dream come true for either Russ or Justin Fields. And if I have to give up a guy like Minkah, I would. Especially just how many times did we see different teams this offseason load up on weapons? And, kind of that was the mantra almost. You can never have enough. And the Steelers seem like one of the teams that have the least. So if you got to lose a defensive playmaker to gain an offensive playmaker, I would do it.
Yeah, it's funny. It would tell you a lot. I mean, again, Fitzpatrick kind of how much is – it's not like he's a pass rusher. Like, that's a little different. Maybe not even a corner. So there's varying levels of, I think, how important a player is. But Fitzpatrick, to your point, has been a good player. That's a name that, like, oh, okay, that makes you think twice.
Yeah.
But I think you guys are – to be dynamic on offense this day and age in the NFL is more important than to be dynamic on defense. You can, figure out the defense. But you need to be dynamic on the offensive side. And I don't think they're as bad at the receiver position as you guys do. I think like Pickens is a good player. So
yeah, but do you think Pickens is a 1?
I think he's close. I think he's pretty close to a 1. Again, he's not that upper echelon 1, but I mean that's a small pool of people that are upper echelon 1. Like I think he can act like a 1, like Christian Kirk act like a 1 for the Jags, and you can still be solid on offense, right? Or pretty good on offense. So I don't hate their weaponry as much as everybody else seems to hate it, but I also would get you add Ayuk to Pickens now you got a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, for sure.
So pretty interesting to keep an eye on what else is going on around the National Football League. We're so locked in the Jags. I actually think it's been somewhat of a quiet training camp for a lot of people. I don't know why that is. I can't put my hand on it, but it just hasn't been a loud training camp, I think, across the NFL. Maybe it was the Olympics.
Yeah.
There's something else going on. Maybe it was a loud enough off season. So it's pretty fascinating to kind of keep an eye on and watch. Bucks and Jags in the joint practices. Doug already said yesterday, hey, we do not want fights. The teams are getting fined, by the way, a couple $100,000 if they do have fights. I think it was the Giants and Lions.
Yeah.
They both got fined, I think, that amount of money. And I don't know if it's just like pushing, shoving, or severity of fight. I think it's got to be a pretty good fight to get fined. But, I mean, $200,000 probably in NFL money is still nothing, but it's a pretty hefty fine if teams do it.
When you say teams are getting fined, though, it's not the players in the fight, right?
I think it's
the team as in general.
So I think put some ownership on the
players
teams.
have to wash some dishes or something and try to pay that off. But, no, I got you. I mean, I understand trying to cut back on fights, but it's still the game of football. Like, it's hot. You're in the dog days of summer. You know, someone could push you after the whistle. Like, things can happen. Like, I understand coaches want to prevent that because they want to keep their players healthy, and the last thing you want to see is a guy throw a punch and break his hand in some guy's helmet. Which, by the way, I mean, I'm sure has happened. The coaches always say it. I've never seen that actually happen.
Yeah, the only thing you ever hear happen from a helmet standpoint, I'm trying to think, is it's usually like a quarterback hitting and hurting the hand, a finger or a hand or something like that. I'm actually surprised it doesn't happen more. Did you see how C.J. Beathard the other day when he got hit didn't get hurt on that play is actually pretty remarkable because, I mean, he's slinging his arm forward as he's getting hit. It just stops. Just stops because he gets whacked on the play. And how you get up from that, I'm surprised there aren't more injuries when it comes to that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I guess overall, I mean, we've kind of noticed it before. We're like, hey, dude, why are you punching a helmet?
Sure.
But I don't know if we've actually got the injury from punching the helmet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I heard that maybe more than anything in training camp is don't get in fights, don't punch helmets, you're going to break your hands,
That never happens.
Of all the fights that I've been in, all the fights that I've witnessed, and there was a bunch in Chicago that I witnessed, and that wasn't even part of, just witnessed them, never saw somebody break their hand.
So do you think... I mean, take the Bucks the way they are. The Jags are very businesslike. The Lions going up there last year, there was a lot of jawing going on because of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So you could tell like that could get under your skin a little bit. You want to go bow up. Campbell's team kind of plays like that. No surprise they were fighting against the Giants, right? What do you make of the Bucks? Do you think coming in, like what are the odds that we're going to see a decent fight?
A decent fight? I'm going to say probably not too high. I mean, like the odds, I would say like plus 400, plus 300 that you'd see. Like I'm saying, like a brawl. Like you're gonna see maybe some pushing and players holding each other back, but like
extra blows with the whistle.
Yeah,
there.
But an all-out brawl, I think is going to be a little more rare because I think that Doug Peterson, especially being in Jacksonville, is going to try to limit any of that.
Yeah, I just don't suspect that we'll see a lot of it now. A little extra shove on Trevor. You get that offensive line that bows up. Obviously, a guy like Cam Robinson. Will the Jags be a little feisty on that defensive side? Will they try to? Does it say something to your team that if you are a little bit like that, is it okay to get pissed off sometimes in camp? I think that part is encouraged to show some attitude, to build some attitude. And I think of the offensive line specifically. I think you want to almost see something out of this offensive line where it's like, hey, you're not messing with us. Like we're going to impose our will. I said this yesterday. I said I think the Jags look pretty physical. They look the part, as good as they've looked probably in my time covering the Jaguars as a really he shows up on the defensive side to me more than the offensive side. But from an offensive perspective, you want a little nasty in that offensive line. And quite frankly, the last couple of years, they haven't had enough nasty. So maybe this is a place where the nasty comes out without taking a 15-yard penalty.
Yeah, I mean, if you got to let it fly, let it fly. But I'm also excited from the Buccaneers coming to town because they obviously have a pretty solid offense. They have great wide receivers. They're going to test the secondary of the Jaguars, and especially the secondary now that might be a little deep in its own right, where some guys can maybe come to the forefront in terms of depth purposes of where you want to put them, depending how these practices go now with these Bucs wide receivers.
Yeah, and I think they're going to really try to get if they're going to do this, they're going to get a lot of good work in to the point where obviously they don't have to play on Saturday night, a lot of these first teamers. So there's a lot of jobs to be won. I was thinking of this as you're talking about fighting and hands on helmets and other things like that. How about the Ventrell Miller Club? You saw it the other night?
Yeah.
So his hands wrapped, obviously, he had the hand injury, kept him out of practice for a little bit, or he was limited. Mm-hmm. And so then he shows up at the game, and I mean, this thing is like, I mean, it's huge.
Of course, yeah.
I said to somebody on the sideline, I'm like, I'm actually surprised they're allowed to play with that. That looks like a weapon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I'm surprised you're allowed to wrap your hand to that extent and be able to play. Now, the protection of the injury is obviously there. Heck, I mean, I feel like you could protect anything with the size club they had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But are you a little surprised you can get away with a club with all the hand fighting that goes on? I know the linebacker spot's different, but I mean, sometimes we see this with even the offensive lineman or defensive lineman.
No, I'm not really surprised. I mean, obviously, if you smack somebody across the head, like that could be a penalty and everything, but no, I'm not too surprised by it. I had to play with the club my sophomore year at college.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I feel like I've asked you that before.
Yeah.
I thought you might have had one. Vaguely, in my mind, I thought you might have had one in Jacksonville, but I guess maybe your hands wrapped up.
Maybe I had a lot of things in Jacksonville. I might have, but for like a game or so. But I mean, yeah, I had the broken fingers. You had to they call it buddy tape. I always used to tape my fingers up just because I always would break them and everything. Yeah, I mean, as long as, like, back in the day, I feel like in the 70s or, like, the 60s when, like, the NFL Films was celebrating nonstop violence, like, yeah, if you had clubs on, you could smack somebody in the chin and, probably concuss them just from the stiffness of that club. But nowadays, I mean, I don't think it's, like, that brutal in terms of, hurting somebody with it. And obviously, it takes away from your tackling. It takes away from trying to wrap up somebody, and it makes it harder. Heaven forbid, if a ball comes your way with an interception, probably not going to get it.
Yeah, well, that's true. And we've seen that. I think it was Devin Lloyd, actually, who played with that, I think, his rookie year. Mm-hmm. And he had his hands on a couple of footballs and had a chance. Mm-hmm. And that was during the stretch, actually, where he was getting the turnovers.
Yeah.
And he could have had two or three other ones, I remember, but he was playing with a not as big a club as Ventrell Miller. I mean, that thing was huge the other day. So it's pretty surprising. Hey, with the play, speaking of that, with the play of Miller, and maybe less Miller, but more Muma, I was thinking of this after the show yesterday when you were talking about Lloyd. Could they have a quick hook? Are they going to give him a lot of rope? If he doesn't play well, I mean, with these other guys, they've got plenty of competition there.
Yeah. I mean, it all depends because Ryan Nielsen's not tied to Lloyd. Like, Ryan Nielsen wasn't here when they drafted Devin Lloyd, so, like, he has no marriage to it. But I think the optics from Trent Baalke's side is like, hey, we got to give this guy every opportunity to succeed because if we don't, it's going to look pretty bad on us then when we drafted this guy in the first round and, now he's not even starting. So I think they're going to give him a little longer leash maybe than other players just because of where he was drafted. But that's not to say if it doesn't turn around, if it doesn't look good, that, he can't ride the pine because I think Ryan Nielsen's thinking, I need the best 11 guys out there. I don't care where they're drafted or what their stories are or what the optics are going to be. I need 11 guys that can fly around and make plays.
And listen, I think we got to be it's maybe a player or two that you noticed the other day, and that was like the disappointing part. Lloyd still not quite figuring it out. He's moved so back to that Mike or to that Mike spot. But I just also think when you have that conversation and if that starts to build a little bit, where it's like, okay, this is happening more and more, and there's a little bit of a concern there. You do have two capable guys. They like Ventrell Miller. I mean, they drafted him in the fourth round, but they like the way he's played. He just hadn't stayed healthy. But Muma's a guy that they really invested in as well. I mean, one of the two guys isn't going to play a lot. I mean, Muma's going to play the strong side right now, but they invested draft capital in both guys. So I don't really look at this as much egg on the face as getting it right. I mean, if the third round guy is better than the first round guy, so be it.
Brent, but if your first round guy doesn't produce, that's egg on your face.
I get it, but not if like 5 other guys do. You know, like I don't know.
You can't miss your first round picks.
Well, they
can't do it,
but they didn't that year, right? I mean, they got Trayvon too. He was part of it. They took a risk to trade back into the first round.
Yeah, but Devin Lloyd is still a first round pick. Like, if he's not going to be your starter, and listen, I'm not going to write Devin Lloyd off yet. Like, there's still plenty of preseason left to go. He can figure it out. Like, I'm not saying he won't be the day one starter by any means, but I think that if he doesn't become the day one starter, and we're talking about Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller playing over him, then yeah, I think as a GM you have a little egg on your face because you have to get. Your first round picks to be starters. Like, that's why you draft them in the first round.
Yeah. It would just depend what it looks like. If we're having our conversation yesterday of like, hey, now you got 5 guys from that 2023 class and the 22 class of Trayvon and Muma and blah, 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 blah. And then, okay, now we've got the 27th pick that traded to back up for didn't work out, but the 21 class did and everything else. I think in totality, you can swallow it a little bit easier. If you're not winning football games and the rest of those guys, it's still just Anton Harrison from the 23 class or whatever else. The bottom line is, to me, they're going to waste a pick somewhere in there anyway. I mean, Muma's not going to – if Muma doesn't play more reps, he's not helping the team.
But I think from a third-round pick, I mean, yeah, you want to see your third-rounder starter as well, but if you get some special team stuff out of them, at least, like, that's something. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to drafting a guy in the third round if he's a special teams ace or a big contributor in the special teams. I am opposed to drafting a guy in the first round and just putting him on special teams and saying, this is our guy now. Like, no, if you're a first-round pick, you have to be a starter.
Do you think Muma can play probably either one of those spots, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously he's playing the strong side right now. And again, I think it's worth noting. I think he went under the radar a little bit the other day, but he was a guy that showed up. I thought the other thing that I noticed from him, and it was really maybe the first time I just looked at him real close, another guy that seemed to get more physical from last year to this year. The look of him was more physical. I don't know if he gained weight or any of those kind of things, but we're actually.
Does he have a mustache that look more physical?
No, I don't know. You can tell these guys sometimes. I mean, I say the same about Christian Braswell. To me, I don't know if you would have noticed him last year. I think you kind of noticed him. He looks physically developed better.
Okay.
Remember that too. I said this yesterday, but kind of in passing. One of the things that Trent Baalke, when January of this year, when he finally did the news conference, he said stuff about like the strength and conditioning, because I remember bouncing back at him and saying, well, do you need to make a change there? And it was kind of a weird mixed message thing, was like, are we doing enough in the weight room, or are we doing the right things in the weight room? I was like, well, okay, if you're not, are you going to make a change? No, we love what they're doing. It was kind of this weird thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would just say so far, so good in the weight room from the look of it for the Jags, of a lot of different players. And I don't know if it might be a story that we have to kind of dig into and say, did you do something different? Was the approach different? And I think what Baalke was trying to say there was, hey, we need more competition in that room too. Every rep has got to be a competition. So we're just all getting better, increasingly better. And I think that's what Baalke was trying to say. At the initial stage, I was like, did he just throw the strength and conditioning guy under the bus? Yeah, a little bit. But then he's like, no, we love him. And so it was a very weird thing. But the bottom line is that was another thing that was the Jags were attentive to, I think, in the offseason.
No, for sure.
As how they're crafting that part of it, which I said this yesterday. It's almost like a high school and a college thing. You don't usually hear about that as much in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But I think it's notable because all these guys added weight for Ryan Nielsen, and all these guys are developing. A lot of young guys anyway turned into from young men to grown men, in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, stay tuned for Brent and Austen beach body all first team coming down this Friday. We're going to break down some bodies.
Yeah, I think we might have to. You got to have a big, good body to play this game, I guess. Play it
for the I know a couple guys who didn't have like the best bodies that were all right though with it.
Yeah,
but no,
get away with it.
Sometimes obviously, if you're in the interior, I feel like you get away with it a little more. Yeah.
So anyway, I would keep an eye on. I think Muma's going to be interesting. I think that linebacking core is interesting. And there's one thing, I think you can be critical of it too. Why have the Jags spent so much investment on the linebackers? Not every team does that. Lloyd first round, Muma third round, the next year, Ventrell Miller fourth round. That's a lot of investment. But if something doesn't go right there, well, one of the three better work.
You'd hope so. Yes.
I mean, something better work if you're going to invest that kind of capital in that room. One of the topics we had on our show today, find me a back end of the roster player that's caught your attention. One of the things we're doing with Action Sports Jacks this week is we're actually having conversations with a bunch of these guys. After practice, we can request a player. And so a lot of the players you get, marquee names from the Kirks to the Ingrams to others. Well, this week, we're trying to find some of the guys that maybe will surprise and did surprise the other night or look good the other night. And what if they continue that trend? And kind of ironic because we talked Tayshaun Gibson. He was an undrafted free agent. Look what he's done with his career. So there are plenty of examples that it can happen. Who's going to be an undrafted free agent to make the roster potentially this year? Not an easy roster to make. The Jags have a bunch of capital invested in draft picks, 13 of them last year, to more draft picks this year, which you're probably going to give the nod to those guys over undrafted free agents, but usually someone will steal the show and figure out a way onto the roster. Who's got your attention, Austen?
I mean, this guy, he got a lot more playing time because of just injuries and everything, but I think he's going to be kind of towards the back end of the depth. But I think he might have had the best game out of anybody. And with all due respect to Parker Washington, I think Terrell Edmonds wasn't as an absolute beast. Had some big hits. I believe he caused 2 fumbles, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that huge.
And once again, we talk about this Ryan Nielsen defense of what Ryan Nielsen's looking for. I think Edmonds checks a lot of those boxes. So to me, Terrell Edmonds really stuck out. Honorable mention going to Abdullah as well at the edge. Had his sack and everything. Was kind of flying around a little bit, but yeah, I'm going Terrell Edmonds all day.
How important, and you've lived this world, how important is it to make a splash play? Now, see, there's a lot of other things. You take a guy like Abdullah. I don't fully know how he played in the game, but he makes a splash play. He follows the guy. He was kind of you could say it was a cleanup sack, but that's pursuit. They want to be able to see that. He got some help from some of his friends, of course, but he was able to finish off that sack. So to me, it's splash play. I agree with you. How do they play the rest of it? I don't know. So how important is the splash play?
Well, the splash play is important, but you combine the splash play with plays where it's like, what are you doing? Like, what'd you do that for? We weren't really asking a lot from those two guys, especially Terrell. I mean, I felt like Terrell Edmonds was in the right spot at the right time every single rep that he got. I was never like, he shouldn't, I just think that, and this is a guy with experience too. It's not like he's a rookie or anything, so he's played a lot of football, so he knows what he's doing. But
first round pick.
Yeah.
Right?
But I think from what you saw from him, granted is maybe against, lesser competition, doesn't really matter. I thought he had a hell of a game.
All right, Hamby, what about you?
All right, I will take Esezi Odumewu.
Oh, you just wanted to say his name.
Odumewu, sorry.
Nope. You had it the first time.
You had it the
first time. See, when you backtrack, then you start questioning it.
Here's the deal. Nobody else knows. So just say it fast.
I'm taking Odo.
Well, maybe his wife or family are listening.
All right, but I mean, nobody listens. They're not. They might.
Oh, nobody listens. Okay.
No, I mean, nobody listening knows.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Well, I'm saying maybe his family's listening.
Well,
yeah, man.
Now they are.
Yeah, maybe
now they hate the show and just turned it off.
Yeah. Yep. And they go the rating.
No problem.
Probably had a big family too. But anyway, sorry, Hamby. Go ahead.
First year with the Jags, played 1 year with the Vikings. He made a lot of plays in Saturday night's game. I think he was in the backfield, it looked like 3 or 4 times. Had a couple of tackles. I know he had at least 1 sack. I don't know if they're giving him any credit for another. But he was in there. He also had a tackle for loss. So, and he played seemingly early in the game, which I think helps his cause, because I think if we're trying to guess, and I know it's real early, if we're trying to guess, we would go more off of when these guys played against more than we would go off the depth chart right now. And Odo was in there in the first quarter. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe he was in there somewhat into the third, but he was in there in the first.
I think he was.
Which means he's towards the front, handing the dirt guy, could he be right behind Roy? not sure. I think a lot of his roster ability, if that's a word, will be based off of how much.
I don't think it is.
How much they
I'm
trust.
not mad at that.
How much they trust the two rookies from LSU, Jefferson and Mason Smith, and we know that those guys are going to make the roster because you spent a second and a fourth round pick on them. But if the Jags feel handcuffed and that they don't trust those guys, but they have to roster them for the future, Odo could be a good guy to be in the mix.
Man, I just wish now that looking back at my career, John Fox would have told me my last time getting cut from the Bears, you just would have said, Austen, you just don't have the roster ability that we're looking for right now. Would have been a lot easier as opposed to, you know what, you're just a little too old to go in a younger direction. Okay, sir, I'm 25 years old, but you got it.
Is that what he said?
Roster ability was just not there.
I think I was like 26 or something, but yeah, that's what he said. It's too old.
That was the day he got that news twice.
Oh no, that was before.
That
was the Mark Trestman era, and then no, you're fine. Then it came back for the John Fox era. Really saw a lot of peak times in Chicago with eras.
What would have been wild is if you got the news twice in one day, and they'd already changed coaches.
Dude, the way that organization was going, Brent, I'm surprised that didn't happen. Honestly, they had some rough times.
I like your Odomewo as a good pick there, and I like what you're saying about Edmonds. You know, Edmonds caught my attention so much that that's why I was a little bit surprised on the Gibson stuff. It's like he's coming off a big game.
I know.
He played really well to go well with everything else, like the Dewey stuff and Antonio Johnson. But it's like, okay, well, if something does falter here, this guy just played really well.
Yeah.
So why do you need to go get another player? But they have their reasons. But that's one of the reasons it was surprising to me is because coming off a very good game by Edmonds. All right, I think you can go a couple different ways here. In fact, I think you could go bigger names where people out there might say, hey, Brent, what about Christian Braswell? Because to be honest with you, going until the depth chart came out on Wednesday, he was the back end of the roster guy. I think in many respects. And then they have number one on the depth chart. But then he performed like it. Like he really performed well. So now all of a sudden I think he kind of gets out of the scope in our minds of a player that we're talking about here. It's tough to be a draft pick and have this conversation about a draft pick too. So my guy is DJ Coleman.
Yeah.
And this is the guy we talked to today. I requested him and Marcel did the interview with him. But I feel like I've seen 54 in a lot of places. And that's kind of how I do it. Now, I have no idea if that is always a good thing. You could be in a wrong spot, and I can still see you.
Yeah.
But I thought 54 was all over the place. I also think Coleman is a guy now with the injury to Dixon that thing's pretty wide open. That fourth, fifth, really fifth pass rush spot, if there is room for that. I think Gibson kind of has the fourth lockdown if you want to include Armstead as the third guy, which the Jags are kind of doing. But I don't really – I mean, we're going to learn a little bit more about DJ Coleman.
Yeah.
I don't know how he's not catching attention. He probably is. Got a lot of playing time the other night too. So watch number 54. He I think, has a real chance to make this roster.
No, it's one of the benefits of having a swaggerless number on the defensive line, 54, and you're playing on the line. You're going to stand out a little more. So I hope if he does make the team, he changes that number. But who knows? Maybe it's significant, but I assume that it's kind of threw it at him and said, all right, good luck with that number.
Yeah. By the way, he's out of Missouri. Second-year guy out of Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, like, I took this question as more, like, doesn't matter, like, where you're drafted or, like, what.
That's okay.
I mean, it's just more of, like, where you're on the depth chart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we wonder if Edmonds is going to be on the roster. Right?
Yeah.
Wonder if a guy like Coleman's going to be on the roster.
I think with what Edmonds did, like, he's making the case, but would you say that's probably the deepest safety? Well, now with Gibson, too?
Well, it's interesting. Going into the year, I thought it was maybe their weakest spot. Now, did they have bodies that you knew? Yes. But were they dynamic there? They basically, if you go into the year, and a little bit of this is Darnell Savage, I'm viewing as a corner at the time.
Okay.
The nickel corner. But if you view him as a nickel corner, just come with me for a second, then I think you have Cisco and you feel good about it. And then Antonio Johnson was a little bit of a question mark, but you're going to plug him in. And then you have Dewey, who obviously has made plays and he's a good special teamer, but he's never going to be an all-pro, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then you had Daniel Thomas, who, again, special team worthy, but I don't know how great he is in the safety spot. He's obviously got some experience. So I think you could actually make the case that that was one of their thinnest positions.
Sure.
Now, the names we knew, but I don't know how good the games were. There were too many unknowns to know. Now you sit here and you're like, okay, Edmonds, that's not only a name we know, but we just saw it play out. We know Gibson can play in the league. You like the Amos, who they brought in, Hamby, who's a 10-year guy, right? Who's got a lot of experience in the league. And then the fact that you now say Savage, is he going to play there? Can he play there? He's listed on the depth chart back there.
Yes.
So
And they got that Flowers guy who
you're right. The depth has grown. And Flowers.
They put out a corner, but he spent time at safety too in training camp. He's that 6'3" dude who's gigantic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, really one of the only guys that didn't pop, at least to me, and maybe played well, and I just didn't see it, was Hallett. You know, of the guys that they brought in last year.
Yeah.
Like to make a play. But remember, yesterday I went through all the draft picks of the 2023 class. Hallett was a guy that was in that.
Yeah.
But he didn't really, to me, he didn't do anything, at least that I noticed. Maybe they noticed a little bit more. I'm just saying my eyes didn't notice it. So, yeah, it's fascinating. You know, it's a good question. From where they were, let's just say in June, to where they are now at that safety spot, I would say it's a hell of a lot deeper.
Yeah, for sure.
But I still wonder if better name than game.
Well, I mean, it's definitely the names. I mean, hopefully the cream does rise to the top here, but I just think in terms of overall depth of options where you could go with, I mean, I think with the emergence of Edmonds now, and we'll see what the plan will be with Gibson. Like, there's a lot of ways you could go with the secondary and the safety spot.
All right, so there's another one out there that we didn't mention, but we're going to hear from him right now. Stuart Weber caught up with Breland Speaks, and this is a fascinating story. A guy out of UFL was Defensive Player of the Year. He's got numbers. If you like production, a guy that actually produced and has produced, well, this could be your guy. I just think it's fascinating that he came in like middle of last week, gets thrown in the game, and he's already in the box score. He's back there for a sack. So maybe just guys who produce. And we're seeing some of the UFL guys get signed around the National Football League. And the Jaguars took a chance on Breland Speaks, and he spoke to Stuart Weber this week.
Catching up with Jaguars defensive lineman Breland Speaks. And Breland, it was a hot one today. We could still see the sweat on you, even with moving indoors. Just the conditions. This is good for the team, right? Because there's a lot of 1 o'clock games on an NFL schedule.
Definitely. I was talking to somebody. I was like, hey, Jacksonville mess around and get that top seed in the AFC, man. Hey, this is definitely advantage if guys got to come down here and play in this.
For you, a little bit of a battle today, but I like to think that's a growth opportunity, right? A chance to work through it and to show the staff that, yeah, you can handle when some adversity comes your way.
Definitely. Today was actually my first practice. Everything else been kind of walkthroughs, and then we had the game. But today was definitely a wake-up call for me just to make sure I'm doing the things necessary. But all in all, it's good, man. I just want to show guys that, hey, at the end of the day, I'm not a quitter. That isn't in my DNA. And I'm going to keep going regardless of what's going on.
Talk to me about Saturday night's experience. You've been in camps, you've been on NFL rosters, but this is your first chance with Jacksonville to go out there and showcase it with a live game.
Yeah, it was special for me, man. Definitely getting another opportunity to show what I can do at the highest level. Really, I felt pleased with my performance. Felt like I could do a couple more things better, but all in all, felt pretty good about Saturday. Being signed on Wednesday, coming right in and being able to play and get a sack. So, hey, it was fun for me.
Sacking guys is something you've done a lot of over the last couple of years, right? Both in the USFL and UFL. Those traits and those skills that you have translate right over to the NFL game. I think that's one of the differences between if you were an arena guy or a CFL guy where the rules are slightly different. Talk to me about just using that same skill set that you've developed over a lengthy pro career now to get after the quarterback.
Just always have wanted to be better with my hands. I always wanted to have a clean technique, have always been a bigger end. So when I throw moves, they have to be a little bit more calculated and I have to be more violent. So really just understanding the tackle set, how they're trying to block me, what they're trying to do to me, and me just with that experience you were talking about, seeing things for over these years, I'm knowing how to adjust on the fly and do what I need to do.
One of the big question marks that we've had with this Jags defensive line, yes, you've got two of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Where do the sacks come after that? That's always the question. How much do Josh and Trayvon really coach up the rest of the group and keep the whole group involved, knowing that, in the NFL, two guys aren't going to do it. It's got to be waves upon waves.
Oh, those two guys, they put everybody first. They both are leaders, man. They always asking me if there's anything they can help me with. I always asking everybody if there's anything that they can help us with. If we have questions, just come to them. But those guys definitely, to be two of the best players that we have on the team, they're still down to earth, willing to talk, willing to share whatever guidance they can. And even I'm still learning to this day from guys like this. So I'm really just appreciative of those two guys.
So Ryan Nielsen, he is the defensive coordinator. I'm pretty sure his favorite position group is the defensive line. He's always hanging out with you guys. He's always working with you guys one-on-one. Does he tell you guys that you're his favorites?
I think we know. It's one of the things where he doesn't have to tell us. I think it's felt in the room. So definitely happy to be in his room this year and be able to be coached by him.
Last one for you, a little off the football. You just got here. Initial impressions of Jacksonville? Have you had a fun moment? Have you gotten to go to the beach? Have you been able to take a breath even?
Nah. It's kind of just been in my iPad at the hotel or up here at the facility, man. And that's kind of how I want to keep it. Really just focusing on making this team. And, hey, we make this team, we can go experience some of the beach and all of that other stuff, but we got to put the work in first.
That's Breland Speaks, former Ole Miss Rebel, of course. And this isn't like a super young guy. He's been around the block. I mean, he was a second-round pick in 2018.
Yeah.
So to see him still on this journey is pretty wild. That heat got him yesterday. He had to be helped off the field a little bit, but then he went back in. So look at the journey of this guy, man. The second-round pick in 18 of the Chiefs. So he stays with the Chiefs for a couple years, actually wins the Super Bowl. Then he goes to the Raiders, then the Cowboys, the Giants, back to the Cowboys, the Bills, the Michigan Panthers of the USFL, San Francisco 49ers, Michigan Panthers.
Come on.
I'm sorry, that would have been, is that the USFL or the UFL? That would be UFL. And now the Jags. So, and he's the sacks leader in the USFL in 2023, and he's the defensive player of the year in the UFL in 2024.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
What a wild journey. Now, can he play at this level is the question.
We'll tell. Yeah, time will tell.
He's got 1.5 sacks in his NFL career.
Okay.
So,
listen, a lot of guys, and probably including me in that position, probably would have just said, all right, it's time to do something else. But this dude has stuck with it, and obviously has aspirations to play at the highest level. So, you can't knock the tenacity, the stick-to-itiveness for him just to say, I'm gonna ride this out till the wheels essentially fall off. So, props to him for staying at it, man. It says a lot about his character.
Yeah, I want to see real quick how big he is. He's 6'3", 285.
Okay.
So he looked kind of long there, didn't he?
Yeah,
More
yeah.
lean and long, but 6'3" will do that. So, I don't know where he fits, but he's just another guy to watch.
Keep doing your thing, man. Yeah.
Next couple of days. Again, that's a position we started to show up a little bit. They brought in a bunch of different guys in that spot to kind of compete for the back end to try to get that fifth spot or fourth spot or push. Right now, it really looks like you've got 4 pass rushers, and then what? You've got Josh, you've got Trayvon, you've got Eric Armstead, and you've got Travis Gibson. After that, it's a mystery, and they're trying a bunch of guys out right there. And speaking of joint practices, why not hear from Press Taylor a little bit and what they're going to try to accomplish during these joint practices? Here's the Jaguars offensive coordinator.
Joint practice is a really good opportunity for us to put our quarterback in a lot of situations without exposing him to taking hits. So we can work a lot of third and long type things that you may have to hold the ball. We can introduce some new concepts that we've been trying to invest in a lot through camp that now we get a new defense to test them against, but maybe we don't want them out there to the world yet, and we're still working through some things. And then I think as far as reps with those guys in the game, I think there's a good chance however it sorts out, and coach will make the final decision on it, I think there's a good chance you probably see those guys play a little bit more than you did the other day at least. I think a big part of it is for us, we want our guys to see guys that they haven't played against a lot. You start to get, you get a Darby against Brian Thomas so many times, they have a good feel for each other. There's less risk involved from both sides of what we're trying to do here. They know it, we know it, we're trying something different. You tend to play a little bit differently. So it amps up the competitiveness. It amps up kind of the unknown, which is the cool part. That's football for us. But there's still a protected environment, which is a good thing. But I think for us too, as the offensive staff, there's a lot of things we want to see if they're good, see if we're good at these certain things. Maybe we need to see a new scheme to test some of them. We're trying to build tapes and learn about it and teach it for our guys as we get into this stuff. So there's a lot to learn. I really enjoy it. I think we get a lot out of it. And again, it's who you're working with and the environment they have on their staff and the way they work and what you're getting out of it. But I think it would be a great experience.
Well, that's Press Taylor talking about joint practices. I think you do get a lot out of these. I'm a fan of the joint practices, maybe even at times more than the preseason games. You know you're going to sit your guys in one preseason game anyway, and the way it's shaped up now with 3, and you have that big layoff between game 3 and the regular season, it does make sense to actually play your guys in game 3, which is the one where you never used to play anybody. But I always find it interesting that you have to find, or you think you should find, a dance partner in the joint practices that is trying to get a similar thing accomplished. Mm-hmm. Like Marone and the Jags went up to New England the one year, and it kind of comes off that tree, cough, like all that makes some sense to me. What I thought was interesting is the marriage between Detroit and the Jags last year.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if that's tree coordinated or stylistically, I don't feel they're a lot alike. But maybe the way they view the game and see the game. Dan Campbell's a former player, Doug Peterson, former player, obviously. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what makes up the good dance partner. You got to have it on their schedule too. So I mean, it doesn't fit every year. Mm-hmm. And Doug, I think, is a guy that's never going to do 2 of them in a preseason.
Yeah,
I think the Jags did do that one year with Marone, but I like it. I think it's kind of a change of scenery for these guys, and we'll see what they get out of it. Now, what always sticks out to me about joint practices is when they went to Baltimore one year, they were like, hey, part of the reason we like the idea of Baltimore is you get Lamar Jackson, see him running around a little bit, and you might, how to defend that. And you get a look at that because the league's getting more mobile. And then they were so disappointed coming out of here because, they didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, just ran a wishbone, might as well have, right? Didn't show us anything.
So they were almost like, the way I took it is when they set it up, Harbaugh and company, again, this is my interpretation, Harbaugh and company was like, yeah, we'll probably do some of that stuff. And then they got there and they didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a little disappointment. I would love to know the behind-the-scenes conversations of Andy Reid and Doug Peterson going into the game last week. Okay, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. What do you want to get out of it? What do you want?
Sure.
You don't have to tell me what play you're running, but.
No, I mean, I think that they would help each other out because obviously there's that common rapport there. I think Andy Reid was kind of like a mentor to Doug Peterson.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so they definitely had some sort of, I don't want to say script right up, but I'm sure they kind of went over a little bit of what they want to see from each other's team.
Yeah, and so to that point, now you have these conversations with Todd Bowles and the staff and what you're trying to get accomplished with Tampa. That relationship, I think, is kind of fascinating because most of the time you're competing against each other. Mm-hmm. You want to win. Mm-hmm. It's a secretive league. It's a paranoid league. But in these instances, you're kind of going back and forth and working hand in hand to make sure you get the most out of these practice sessions. So I just find that relationship pretty interesting. There's another two headlines coming out of the last couple of days. One, I just mentioned this to you. The Bills are placing wide receiver Chase Claypool on injured reserve. I'm like, man, what a weird career for that guy. A wasted career now, right? Mm-hmm. But it got off to a good start, I thought, and got people excited.
He was the guy for a little bit. He was Mapletron in Pittsburgh, and I could never really because he was with Pittsburgh, Chicago, Miami. And now maybe went to Buffalo then. Okay,
I didn't even know he was with the Bills.
yeah, for sure.
But that's kind of where he's gone. So speaking of receivers, I saw this quote from Matt LaFleur yesterday, and he said something to the effect of, "You guys want to make me vomit when you say wide receiver number 1." And so it got me thinking a little bit. And so his viewpoint was like, "Listen, we got guys that can do a lot of things."
Well, this is Matt LaFleur, right?
Yeah.
Well, because you don't have one.
Yeah. But
okay,
so you don't want to label it.
Yeah, it's because because Devontae Adams isn't there anymore. That's why.
But it got me thinking, what if fans get wrapped up in, label all these things that coaches don't, organizations don't. Because, like, I could see Doug saying a very similar thing. Doug won a Super Bowl without necessarily a number one wide receiver in Philadelphia. So the stock put on that is probably not as much as maybe somebody else who says, in Miami, I can't live without a number one wide receiver, right? I need two of them.
Yeah.
But are there other things that fans fall in love with? Their coaches are like, you guys are out of your mind.
It's a good question.
When you label us this way. It might be. I'll give you another thing. I mean, I'm trying to think of it as I say it in real time.
Yeah.
It might be like that the league is so pass happy all the time. Yes, it's more pass happy than ever before, but I also go back to Doug when he won you would label Doug as a pass happy guy. Mm-hmm. Well, when they won the Super Bowl, they were 46%, I think it was. They ran the ball way more than people thought they did.
Mm-hmm.
I think offensive line in general is one where the organization always stands up for the offensive line and thinks they're better than the fans do.
Okay.
So that kind of fits. It's not necessarily that's just good versus bad.
Mm-hmm.
But the perception of everybody's offensive line is they suck. And internally, everybody will vouch for them.
Yeah.
So,
Man,
I don't know if there's anything else.
I wonder, like, how, and this is kind of, I've been out of the league since this has been really a thing, but the whole analytics part of it. Like, how much do coaches buy into the EPA? How much do coaches buy into PFF and all that stuff?
That's a good call.
Because we, fans, on Twitter especially, love to use those type of numbers.
They do.
Like, that's almost like the biggest gauge of determining whether a player is good or not, is what the analytical PFF and whoever's running that show says, or what some type of formula that nobody can seriously explain to me in terms of EPA. Like, I don't know.
How about, I'll go more specific, PFF, right?
Oh, yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but PFF in 6-7 years ago, I think was more like that. Now they use it.
Okay.
See, I think now they use it. Okay. I think now they've got departments that use it.
Sure.
Was it the only thing they use? No. Is it the only thing we see or outside people see? To your point, yeah, probably. Mm-hmm. But I think you're right. I think this was a little bit like baseball analytics. You had your, like, half the people or 2/3 of the people still hanging on to, hey, I'm using my gut, right?
Do you think they used EPA in determining Trevor's contract?
Good question. I'm going to say no.
Okay.
When you say they, do you mean Trevor's side or
anybody?
Side?
I mean, I assume Trevor's side because he had a very high EPA. So, like, maybe your numbers didn't reflect on being the highest paid quarterback, but you have numbers that show, like, your EPA was, like, one of the best in the league. So,
okay, so here's how I feel about numbers in general, and I love numbers. But I think, and I'm now going back in my kind of when the Jags were struggling or this or that. And what I think you'll get is you'll get GMs or coaches or whatever throw those things out at you when they need to, because there are numbers that you can make fit your narrative.
For reassurance,
right?
Yeah.
And so I think the same works for the player and the player agent. Okay, well, you're telling me that Trevor didn't do this or has too many turnovers. Well, look at his EPA, right? Or you tell me he doesn't have enough touchdowns. Well, I'll show you that highlight video because his EPA is so good or whatever is so good that these guys should have caught those balls, So I think when it's your advantage, you end up using it. So I would say probably. You're saying specifically EPA, but broader, you're saying do the analytics come into those contract negotiations? I would say probably. I would think probably. Mm-hmm. Now, what I wonder is, do they just use it when it's their advantage, or do they actually put those as part of the
if there's
stats?
Analytics out there that can, like, back you up in terms of maybe you weren't the best quarterback in the, I got you.
So like now, let's just say when we're negotiating Trevor's contract, you've got, games started, right? You've got touchdowns and yards and win-loss record. You've got all those. Does that list now include EPA or yards per attempt or whatever things you want to get into? Mm-hmm. Does it include some of those that have become normalized to the point where now we're using those to add up, like, how good of a player you are internally? I think externally we do that. I still don't really understand QBR. Mm-hmm. but ESPN, they kind of made this thing up so they could have their own number.
Yeah, it's wild.
So now, but more people will say QBR because a lot of people watch ESPN and listen to ESPN, but rating was the old game. But you can find like a lot of guys from a rating standpoint that pop, but it doesn't always tell the whole story.
I mean, it's wild how ESPN just literally made up their own analytic, and then we should make up our own, Brent.
Well, we could. The problem is we probably couldn't push it out as loudly as ESPN.
Yeah, but if we keep doing our thing, eventually we can push it out. Like, what would our thing be? It'd be like, all right, you take QB swag rating of 100, and then we grade that, and then we multiply that times passing yards per game, and then you divide that by interceptions, and that's going to be our thing. So we're going to add swag to it. We're going to add swag and confidence.
Where's swag on the QBR?
I'm saying on a scale of 1 to 100, there's a swag rating, right? And then we couple that with a confidence rating in terms of standing in the pocket and everything. We can do something. I got it, Brent.
All right.
Awesome people, draw this up for us.
Draw this up. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Hey.
Have it to your table by Friday.
Thank you. Just don't put it on Hamby's table. If numbers, right?
Can you imagine Hamby trying to crunch these numbers? Woo!
You guys are unbelievable.
Yeah. Be like the guy in the bar at Good Will Hunting. Really, you're getting shown up real quick. How you like them apples? I see you, Brent. Nice to you.
Go.